everyone who is joining us right now. Thank you so much for doing so.
Oh, there's a lot of familiar faces.
Hey, these are friends. Hi, friends.
Hi, Dad. Hi,
Hi.
Sprague. Hi, my author friends.
Janice. Tamara.
All right, nice to see everyone. Oh, and we'll let another person in here. Lost my notes. Hello, everyone, and thanks for making time to join us this evening. My name is Michael. I'm the events coordinator and publicist at Annie Bloom's Books. For those of you who aren't familiar with the store, we're located in Portland, Oregon, in the heart of Multnomah Village. We've been around for 42 years now, and we're still plugging along despite everything that's going on in the world right now. Our store is currently closed to browsing, but staff are at the store every day from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. to answer phones and reply to emails. They love to hear from people looking for book recommendations, so get in touch with them, give them a call, send them an email. And our website is always open. You can shop day or night at www.annieblooms.com. Offer curbside pickup and local delivery within 3 miles of the store and various shipping options. We have some great events coming up. Our last 2 events of the 2020 event season, actually, next week. Tuesday on November 10th, we have local author Ellen Michelson with local author Natalie Serber. Ellen's novel, which is brand new, is called The Care of Strangers. It's a moving story about friendship set in a gritty Brooklyn hospital where a young woman learns to take charge of her life by taking care of others. That should be good. And then 2 days after that, on Thursday, 11/12, we are having Marlena Fiel and Sherry Balol, Choosing Compassion Over Fear. They're celebrating World Kindness Day, which I think is the day after that. And Annie Bloom's is thrilled to be partnering with Literary Arts for this year's Portland Book Festival, which started today. We're an official bookseller for the event, which is going to be held entirely online. It runs through November 21st. There's still plenty of time to see lots of different events on there. We have a virtual stage, and we're selling the books for a bunch of great authors that are in that lineup, including there's an event tomorrow at 5 o'clock Pacific time, Genevieve Hudson and C. Pam Zhang, moderated by T. Kira Madden. That should be really cool. Thursday, November 12th at 6 p.m., right before our last event, is Ruman Alam and Jonathan Leatham. That's pretty awesome. And Friday, November 13th, Claire Massoud, Lydia Millett, moderated by Alexander Chi. So those are just a few of the highlights that I picked out from a lineup that you can see on our website. And you can click through and register for events there. Tonight, we are delighted to be hosting Ashley Sweeney along with Ellen Notbohm. We have both authors' books on our shelves right now. Even if you have your own copies, they make great gifts for friends and family for the holidays. So pick up an extra copy. We do free gift wrapping at the store. I am going to put a link into the chat where you can get both of those books. It's the event link. Boom, right there. All right. So they're gonna do a little bit of reading, I think, and mostly a conversation and talking about books, and of course, a little bit about Ashley's book. Ashley Sweeney is the winner of the 2017 Nancy Pearl Book Award for her debut novel, Eliza Waite. Her much anticipated second novel is the one she's reading from tonight, Answer Creek, which was released in May of this year. Ashley is a seasoned journalist, teacher, and community activist. She served as a VISTA volunteer in the late 1970s and continues community service today as a member of Soroptimist, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, International, one of the largest women's advocacy organizations in the world. Early in her career, Ashley found an outlet as a humor columnist and feature editor for the Linden Tribune in Linden, Washington, where she garnered numerous awards for her writing. She's taught English, journalism, English as a second language, and GED prep at both the high school and community college levels. A native New Yorker, Ashley is a graduate of Wheaton College in Norton, Massachusetts, the Stanford Publishing Course, and City University in Seattle, Washington, where she earned a Master's of Education degree. Ashley spends her time between La Conner, Washington, and Tucson, Arizona, with her husband, D. Michael Barclay. So Answer Creek is a gripping tale of adventure and survival based on the true story of the ill-fated Donner Party on their 2,200-mile trek on the Oregon-California Trail from 1846 to 47. 19-year-old Ada Weeks confronts danger and calamity along the hazard-filled journey to California. I'm going to admit someone before I continue to tell you about Answer Creek. After a fateful decision that delays the overlanders more than a month, she, along with 81 members of the Donner Party, finds herself stranded at the Truckee Lake on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada mountains, stuck there for an entirety of a despairing blizzard-filled winter. Forced to eat shoe leather and blankets to survive, will Ada be able to battle the elements and her own demons as she envisions a new life in California? Research with impeccable detail and filled with imagery as wide as the Western Prairie, Answer Creek blends history and hearsay in an unforgettable story of challenging the limits of human endurance and experiencing the triumphant power of love. And one more person is joining. So as I said, we also have with us local author Ellen Notbohm. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Ellen?
You did the first time. Notbohm.
Notbohm, okay. Sorry. Ellen Notbohm. She is an internationally renowned author. Ellen's work has informed and delighted millions in more than 20 languages, in addition to her award-winning books on autism, as of this year, including this year, and her award-winning novel, The River by Starlight. Her articles and columns on such diverse subjects as history, genealogy, baseball, I didn't know about that, writing and community affairs have appeared in major publications and captured audiences on every continent. Ellen is an avid genealogist, knitter, beachcomber, and thrift store hound who has never knowingly walked by a used bookstore or a new bookstore called Annie Bloom.
Annie Bloom's.
Yeah, without going in and dropping coin. I've witnessed this in person many times over the years. We were talking about that earlier, 20 years that I have seen Ellen across the counter. Her novel, her most recent novel is The River by Starlight. 2-3 years ago that came out?
2 years.
Years ago, yeah. We had her at Annie Bloom's for that launch. It's also historical fiction. Annie Rushton leaves behind an unsettling past to join her brother on his Montana homestead and make a determined fresh start. There, sparks fly when she tangles with Adam Fielding, a visionary businessman farmer determined to make his own way and answer to no one. Neither is looking for a partner, but they give in to their undeniable chemistry. I will leave you with that little taste of Ellen's novel and turn it over to her. Ellen.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. And I was just talking to Michael about how Annie Bloom's has been my neighborhood bookstore for 37 years, countless readings over the years, and it feels different to be attending a reading at Annie Bloom's without actually being in the store with your wonderful store cat, Molly, who I will miss during this reading. But
she misses you too, yeah. She's used to walking up the aisle during the readings and greeting people. So you can just imagine a little black cat doing that.
She's a wonderful black cat, and I have a black cat myself, but she is no substitute for Molly. So I'm thrilled to be here tonight. Ashley and I have forged a friendship over the last several years based on our historical novels. And it would be thrilling enough to be here tonight, but I get to open with a spectacular announcement. And that is, we received word this morning that Answer Creek has won the Arizona Authors Association Literary Award. And here I have the first copy of Answer Creek with the badge on it.
You beat me to it, Ellen.
I had to cut it out with my granddaughter's toddler scissors, which is not that easy to do anymore. But in any case, I'm delighted to be here to talk with Ashley tonight about Answer Creek. And it is a fraught time in our country's history. And a lot of people may be wondering, why do we want to read about the Donner Party, who, if anything, had worse problems than what we have now, to put it mildly? And so, Ashley, why write about the Donner Party and why read about the Donner Party?
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. And thanks so much for joining us tonight. I know we're all a little bit distracted with national news tonight. So thanks so much for taking some time out and being here with us for the next hour or so. There'll be questions at the end. We'll leave some time for your questions. I think you can type them in and Michael will keep track of them, or you can just hold them until the end, and that would be great. It's nice to see a lot of familiar faces and some new faces, so thanks. So let's go back, Ellen, just a minute. I want to talk about how I've had a love affair with books since I was 5 years old. I learned how to read early, and in fact, in my kindergarten class, I was actually the teacher's helper, and I did the readings every afternoon when the kindergartners would sit on the mat. So from the very early age, I was a devoted reader and an early teacher. And I came back to get my master's in education in my 40s and went to teach under a mentor who's on tonight. Happy to see you, Ruth. And had a wonderful time being back in high school in my 40s and 50s. That was really a trip. So I just wanted to set the stage with that because I was meant to write this book since the 4th grade. And I say that because I don't know if you remember in your elementary school libraries, but there were racks and racks of biographies for young adults, the Hallmark series and the Landmark series and the Signature series. I just devoured those biographies, and my entire life have wanted to do nothing but write. It took many decades to get there, but my father, who's also on at 91, he wrote 7 novels in his retirement. So I figure I have a long way to go with only 2 out and a 3rd underway. But why the Donner Party? It's a good question. There's a morbid curiosity about the Donner Party, and there's more than 350 books published, not split between nonfiction and fiction. So it's a subject that's been raked over the coals, really. But I thought, if I'm going to write a trail story, I'm going to take on the most iconic trail story of all, and that would be the Donner Party. So I have to look at that story with new eyes. So what I did is I attempted to show the humanity of ordinary people who left the Midwest for the West in the mid-19th century, showing their everyday life on the Oregon-California Trail, how they dealt with disaster, their primal human drive for survival. But I refused to vilify them. That was the new lens on the Donner Party. These people did what they needed to do to survive, and we can't judge them for that. We don't know what we would do in a similar situation. So at the heart of it, it's ordinary people who want a better life for themselves, like a lot of the immigrants who are coming to our borders today. 2 things they had to deal with. They had to deal with a lot of hardship, and that's where resilience comes in. And there's something called the resilience theory. I did a lecture on it about a month ago at the Sacramento Public Library about how it matters less what trauma we encounter as how we deal with it. Also, it's a story of hope. And that's something that I think anybody needs at any time, especially at this time in our history. Ada Weeks, my protagonist, I say here on the back that she's stripped of everything. She's stripped of her values. She's stripped of her faith. She's stripped of her reputation. She got to a place that was so low that she had 2 choices. She could give up or she could go on. And Ada chooses to go on. And that's something that we have to dig deep inside of ourselves too, when we're going through a time like this, digging deep, what do we rely on? Well, for me, I rely on my faith. I rely on nature. I rely on love, and I rely on books, which brings me back to that love affair that started when I was 5, and it shows no sign of stopping now.
So she does, of course, have to make the decision whether to go on, and there are people in the story who don't make that choice.
Mhm. Oh, definitely. It's
Who
very,
do not have that inner resource. But it was interesting where Ada started from, and she's very young. She's 19, and yes, 19 was different in 1845, 46 than it is now. But the story opens with this traumatic event wherein she loses her adoptive parents. And they are her adoptive parents because she lost her original parents in a fire when she was younger. So she is not yet 20 years old, and she has lost 2 sets of parents. And her attitude, you and I talked about it while the book was in its formative stages. And I felt that she had, in spite of the fact that her adoptive parents were kind to her, they were. She kept this kind of distance. It came across to me that way, that there was a distance there. And you and I have talked about how deep the feelings of abandonment go in a child when they lose their parents. And here, 19 is not much beyond being a child, and it happens again. So how does that sense of abandonment and how she deals with it weave itself through the story and lead her to making the kind of decisions she makes?
well, it's no wonder that Ada Weeks is reticent to make friends and to give her heart away. It's just no surprise after you've been orphaned twice by the time you're 19. What she does with that is what we need to do as readers, because readers come to every situation with her or his own biases and experience and worldview. We bring all that to what we read, and then we have to dig deep down inside of ourselves and say, in this case, abandonment, you know, we have to admit, where have we been abandoned, and how have we been abandoned, and by whom have we been abandoned? So fiction often acts as a mirror for a reader. And we need to look at those situations from our own viewpoint at that point. How Ada deals with it is slowly, 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 her heart begins to thaw. She tentatively makes a friend, and it's heart-wrenching when she loses her friend. Then she tentatively gives her heart, and she loses that person in her life. So again, she's been abandoned even after she's made those strides. So she goes into a very deep hole and has to climb out from that. And that's where the story resolves, is how she climbs out of that hole of abandonment. That we're given this one life, and how empty it is if we don't find a way to climb out of that hole and make friends and give our heart.
Well, you just said something that led me into my next thought, is that dealing with abandonment in terms of the things that come and go in your life. And I thought I would inject something warm and fuzzy into the conversation here.
Oh, good.
There's no dogs in this book, so we're not going to go there. But there were some fuzzy, warm animals in this book, and it was a topic of conversation that we had early on, and that, you know, we talk about as historical novelists, how deep do you go into the research, which direction do your research take you, and all that. And it was a well-known fact that there were mules on the Oregon Trail, and Ada had a couple mules. And I was getting a little bit uneasy with the way she was, this was earlier draft of the novel when we were talking about this, getting a little uneasy with how not cavalier she was, but she didn't seem to have a lot of feelings for him. And concurrent with that, almost concurrent with that, was you decided to visit a mule farm. And this is maybe my favorite story of all your research, is how that changed your attitude about mules and how that was then reflected in the story about Ada and her relationship with her mules, who she had to abandon. So that all kind of ties together. Tell us about mules.
Well, this is coming from a girl who grew up in New York, and the only horse she's ever been on is an Icelandic pony, which stood about to her waist. So we're coming at this from someone who does not have a lot of experience with the equine world. I knew that I needed to get to know mules, because all I knew from reading was that they were smelly and they were stupid and they were stubborn. And I wrote that into my first draft. And then Ellen called me on that and said, you know, you really need to get to know your mules a little bit better. In Tucson, there's a wonderful facility called Mule Power Farm. It's actually like a KOA for mule owners. And when I talk about a KOA, it's like a KOA on steroids. It's a whole little Western town, and people from all over the country come to Tucson during the season, the winter season, pulling in these large RVs, pulling these mule carriers, these mule trailers, and they come down to Tucson so that they can pack all winter long in the Catalina Mountains. They're a real community. People go year after year after year. So when I first approached Mule Power Farm and went out for the day, that became an almost monthly visit for us. We've been there multiple times, Michael and I now, and we have fallen in love with mules. We had no idea that they were like the puppies of the equine world. They're affectionate and they're playful and they're loyal and they're intuitive. The reason why a mule will stop and not go any further is because they know more than the rider knows that they're in danger. A mule can see all 4 feet at one time. A horse can only see its front feet, apparently. So a mule is very sure-footed because it can see all of its feet at once. Mules have human names. Every mule is named Sally or Henry or George or Sue. They don't have pet names. They're all human names. Of course, they can't reproduce. So a mule is a product of a mare and a donkey. They're these loving animals. We've gone on a mule ride. I'm looking forward to going on a pack mule train ride on this next time we're down in Tucson. So there's the bottom line about that was I needed to be called on it, to be historically accurate and to be culturally accurate and to be accurate about the characters in my book, in this case, 4-footed characters. But it really struck me that assumptions can kill us as humans. And I was assuming something about mules that was not true. And so it's a example of how we can look at something and we can change our mind. I often go off on tangents, but when I was a young woman, I had really strong feelings about community colleges, how community colleges, you know, were not the way to go, that if you were going to go on to higher education, you needed to go to a 4-year university. So that's an assumption that has been tattered over my life. I ended up being a community college instructor and had some of my best experiences working at a community college. So as we evolve as humans, just like our characters evolve in our books, we have to challenge those assumptions, and we have to be willing to change our mind and be, man or woman enough to say, I was wrong about that.
And that's a function of the research, of course. And the question that always comes to us,
Can we just say
historical novelists,
Zoom
is
is
how much research is enough? I just lost you on the video, Ashley.
Oh,
There you are.
okay.
This is how much research is enough.
Oh, yes. Well, rabbit holes are us, right?
Yeah.
And
Well,
when
you talk about assumptions, and people use the term going down the rabbit hole, which I resent, because I love the times I went down the rabbit hole, because you don't know what you're going to discover that's going to actually enhance what you didn't know that you didn't know. But one of the research things that I think was really fun for both you and I in our novels is how you use language when you're writing about a different century.
Mhm.
So I wrote about this after my novel was published, and so did you, but I would love it if you would share some of the 19th century phrases and adages and idioms that come up in your book, because a lot of times we'll be reading along and I don't recognize it, and it kind of stops you for a minute, but it's fun.
It is, and you have to use those idioms in context so people can grasp the meaning without having to go to, etymology.com. So above my bend, I loved that one. Something was above my bend. It was something that I didn't understand. And I've actually ended up using that. It's come into my own jargon. And there were so many of them, Ellen.
We had a list at one point. I was hoping you remembered the list.
Yeah. Oh, well, I remember when people who ate too many beans had wind colic.
Wind colic.
Wind colic. So of course, beans were the staple with bacon and coffee. When you think of what their diet was like for 5.5 months on the trail, breakfast, lunch, and dinner pretty much the same: beans, bacon, and coffee. So there was a lot of wind colic.
Yeah. Well, in terms of research and language and all that stuff, to the other thing I was just thinking about this afternoon when I was getting ready for this is, and there are a couple of our friends are on the call who are also in the process of writing historical novels or who have written them. And the question with any novel, I think, is where do you start and where do you end? Where's the beginning of the story and where's the end of the story? And again, I think this happened to both you and me. I had sent my novel out to the dreaded querying process, the agents and the publishers. And one agent came back to me and she said, I really like this book. It's not right for my list, but I want to help you. So I'm going to give you some pointers. And what she said was, chop the first 60 pages. And in other words, I wasn't starting in the right place. And you had written this marvelous opening for Answer Creek. But when I read further into the book, I thought, this chapter further on works better as a first chapter. And I think Janice Daly's on the call with us. She learned in the writing of her novel, it was chapter 9. I think chapter 9 is now chapter 1 in her novel. So as we're piecing together a novel, how do we know where to start? How do we know where to end?
Well, one thing is you need to be open to advice and criticism. And that's something that every author has to learn. It's when someone makes a suggestion or criticizes your work. That's what it is. It's your work. They're not talking about your personhood. Your personhood is completely different from your work. So if you want your work to be the best that it can be, you need to take all of that advice from your editor, from your beta readers, from your early readers. Now, of course, you have the final say whether or not you're going to take that advice. But in this case, Ellen flip-flopping my chapters 1 and 2 made a difference, that we start right in the middle of the action now on the very first page. And I see that Wendy's on, she's just come out with a new novel, Prospects of a Woman, and that novel is set a year after Answer Creek in the same vicinity, and with a plucky and feisty protagonist. And I just read the first page of Wendy's book today, and I was like, I'm right in the scene. So Janice, I can't wait to see how your new novel has changed. And you know, Linda and others that are on, to other authors that are on, it's taking that advice. We're a sisterhood here, and we're really trying to help one another to make our work the best it can be. Because once you hand it out, once you push send, the author's job is completed. Then the character has to take over. And that's why I'm so thrilled about Ada winning this award today. It's not me winning the award, it's Ada winning the award. It's her story. I'm the mouthpiece for her story. And going back, Ellen, to what you said about where we start and where we end, that's exactly what I know the first time I sit down to write a new novel. I know where I'm going to start and I know where I'm going to end. And I have absolutely no idea what's going to happen in between. And
That's the interesting
that's
thing
the
about
magic.
that. I wrote the end of my novel right after I wrote the beginning.
Yeah.
Because I needed to know where it was going to end.
Right.
And then along comes somebody who says, throw out the first 60 pages, which I did. And that made me realize that nobody's story is linear.
Right, but we know where it's going to end, and we're going to, I'm not mathematical, but I'm going to, that arc, the character arc and the plot arc, it's all going to move toward that end. And I'm not going to read the end because some of you haven't read the book, but I am going to read you this one part. It's near to the end.
No spoilers.
No spoilers. No, this is no spoilers. Okay. And this goes back to what we talked about earlier about resilience and hope. Come, I dare you, the river whispers. You stand there arguing with the current, but you know as well as any that to stay on shore is only for the faint of heart. Anyone worth her salt is already across. So you dip your toe. Is it enough? Not likely. Sometimes you have to gamble with your life. In you go, calf high, waist high, there, good. Your chest high now. In a second of hesitation, you lose your footing. Your head dips below the surface, your mouth fills with murky water, your arms flail. You are suspended in time, debris swirling around your head. Finally, has it been a minute or a lifetime? Your feet touch gravel. You drag yourself to the far bank, and this is what you hope as you shake cold, muddy water from your dripping hems and your soggy shirt sleeves, and you stamp, stamp, stamp your crusty boots on the sandy shore, that someday, in the time you'd make a baby or bake 100 pies or cross a whole blasted continent, you'll make it to the far side of that last river, and you'll find yourself in a place you call home, a haven of comforts, a respite from the wind. For now, you're spent. You collapse on the river's edge, panting. Perhaps you doze. After a while, when they call you for beans and bread and stale coffee, you rise. You pick yourself up and you go on. So that's the place where I love to be. I love to be with words and with language and at my desk. It's a very lonely endeavor being an author. I'm sure many of you sister authors and fellow authors will agree with me. So the reward is today, winning a huge award, being with all of you tonight here, even though we can't be at Annie Bloom's in the bookshop, which would be the best. At least we can be together, and there's people from all over the country on this call. That's something that we can do with Zoom. So it's really, it's the gravy of being an author is a night like tonight. So it's really a pleasure to see you all.
For those who came in after I made my big art announcement, Answer Creek was this morning awarded the Arizona Authors Association Literary Award. And this is the first copy of the book with the sticker on it because I cut it out with my granddaughter's toddler scissors and smacked it on the book. So for those of you who are just joining us, this was a really exciting morning when I opened my messenger and got this news from Ashley. I think that's a subject that's near and dear to me that I love to hear you talk about is we look at something like Answer Creek and we say it's an historical novel, and it is. But I have a growing irritation with the literary world that wants to slot books into these genres and say it's this, it's that. When I look at Answer Creek, it is an historical novel. It's also an adventure novel. It's also a woman's novel. It's also got a little elements of horror in it. It has romance in it. It is all of these things. So are we coming into a time, or let me say, I hope we're coming into a time when we can free our books from these restrictive genres and talk about cross-genre as a genre? And how does that play into it when you're writing a new novel, which you are now?
Oh, cross-genre is the way to go. And I'm feeling with each novel that I write, I challenge myself to improve in every way, in my craft, in my language. It's not like I have a favorite, because that would be asking me to pick a favorite child. I have 4 children. They're all my favorite on a certain day of the week, but I don't have a favorite. And I'm not going to have a favorite of my protagonists. You know, they fill a certain role. There's a first one, and there's a second one, and now there's a third one. And I love them all. I love them all fiercely. That's something that won't change. So it's something, I don't know. It's just, it's hard for me to explain, even though I'm a wordsmith, how real these characters are to me. And those other authors on will probably agree with, but I want to really segue into books, Ellen. I'd really like to talk about some books that have meant so much to us over time, and books that have meant so much to us now. When you close a book, cross-genre or any other genre, and you close that book and that character lives with you for so long. I mean, Scout has been living in our minds for decades, from To Kill a Mockingbird. Inman in Cold Mountain, that character has haunted me since the book came out. And actually, I recently read a book, which I haven't read such a good book since Cold Mountain, and it's Inland by Taya Obrat. I absolutely adored this book about the Arizona Territory in 1893. And my new novel that I'm working on now is set in Arizona Territory in 1905. So that was one reason why I was drawn to that book. But the language and the depth of character, when you read something so good, you can't wait to pick up the next book. And Ellen, I know you've been doing a lot of eclectic reading lately. What is some of the reading you've been doing?
I have. A couple of years ago, but even more so this year, I've drilled down even farther, is I decided that to be blunt, American bestsellers don't need me. And as an author, I keep being asked, who's your favorite author? What's your favorite book? And really, my favorite authors are the ones I haven't read yet, because I know when I wrote a book, I was wishing and wishing and wishing that people would read my book. And if they just keep reading people they've already read, then nobody would read my book. So I pay it forward by saying that I want to read the books that are not as widely read. And this year and last year, that has been largely foreign novels, because I want to know what matters in other cultures. I want to understand what women are going through in other cultures. And so I've read probably a couple dozen this year, but I pulled two that I thought might interest you. And the first one is called, I don't know if you can see the title on this, called The 40 Rules of Love by a Turkish author whose name I'm going to butcher, Elif Shafak.
Only 40?
Yeah, 40 Rules of Love. And you know, the one-line description is, she's a housewife in New Jersey whose children are grown and don't need her as much anymore. And she takes a job as a slush pile reader for a literary agency. She comes across a book that is about Turkish Sufism. And of course, I didn't know the first thing about that. It's this elegant jewel of a book in which I learned a great deal about Sufism and what it means to be a Sufi, and how they love, and how it's just so much more multidimensional than what we tend to think of in this country. And the other book is called The Secret Lives of Four Lives. It's by Lola Shonyen, a Nigerian author, and it is just a wow. You wonder at the premise of the book, which is why an educated woman would agree to go into a modern day polygamous marriage as the fourth wife, low on the totem pole, and why any of those wives would choose to stay in a marriage like that. And every bad thing you can think of that can happen to a woman happens, and yet the underlying strength of these women and how they persevere in the end, and the secret is just jaw-dropping.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, all these characters that we pick up, they're imbued with these thoughts and dreams and wants and needs, and we walk alongside of those characters. And I recently finished William Kent Kruger's This Tender Land. And I just wanted to jump inside of those pages and take Odie by the hand and give him some advice, but I couldn't do that. And that walking beside those characters, we fall in love with them. So many characters, and their story teaches us. It's not the author doing the work again. It's the characters who are doing the work. And I'm a big fan of looking at the character. It's just like we can remember the names of a lot of songs, but we don't necessarily remember the name of the recording artist. Or we might remember the name of a movie, but we can't remember the director. And there's many books that I remember that I don't really remember the name of the author. What's important is that character, and what that character can teach me, and what that character can teach you, and what that character can teach us. That's at the heart of reading. That's what's there, is what is that character going to teach us, and how is tomorrow different from today because of that book that we've just finished. That's not to say we don't sometimes read some light fiction, but when we're reading contemporary fiction or any cross-genre fiction, that's what I hope by the end of the book, is that character has really spoken to me and changed me.
Well, that's really saying something if it happens as a reader. I think most authors will tell you, and some people think we're crazy and some understand it, but the characters talk to us when we're writing the book. And I am not a crazy person, I'm not. And it was a kind of communication that I got from somewhere when I was writing my book, and it was as real can be. So somewhere in the ether, there's this amorphous line between fiction and nonfiction that is really a lot more malleable than I think it is until we experience it that way. And I mean, my gosh, who hasn't read a book where you weren't convinced by the end of it that the character was real? Scout, for one thing. Does anybody who read that book think Scout wasn't real?
Well, maybe some people have some questions we can go to and see where our conversation goes from there.
Anyone? Feel free to type one in or to raise a hand or just blurt one out. Barbara has a comment. This is especially true when your story is based on real people, but you're writing a novel.
Barbara should know, she did it. She wrote a novel based on a real person. She's one of our sisterhood.
And that's something that I don't do. In my historical fiction, I create a fictional protagonist and insert her into a known era or event. And that's just my spin, but many people do write about historical personages, and that's wonderful too.
Well, what about that though, Ashley? What about taking an entirely fictional character and putting it into a highly familiar, like the Donner Party? So what are the considerations there? What are the boundaries?
She can be an objective observer, but she can also be a fully fleshed character who's walking and breathing, and she's got her own dreams, and she's got her own wants, and she's got her own needs. And so I can help to create her, but she does create herself. I have a method that came to me as I was writing Eliza Waite. I never have writer's block. So what I do is when I sit down at my desk every morning, I write 6 days a week for about 4 to 6 hours a day. I sit at my desk and I place my character in a scene. So I've got the setting and I've got the time of day, and I put the constructs around the character, and then I just close my eyes and I daydream about what that character is doing and what that character is saying. And that goes on for about maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And then I come to the keyboard or to the notebook and I do the writing. So I don't drive the narrative or the dialogue. I watch it and I listen for it as if there's a film going on inside of my head. And then I bring that to the paper. I'm the scribe of the story. I don't sit and decide what my characters are going to be doing or saying. They actually do or say as I'm daydreaming. And I'm not crazy either, Ellen.
I know that. I think Linda just asked a question. Michael, did you?
Yes. Linda Henley, was your character of Ada based on any real person? I know there are disclaimers, but.
Yes, Linda, my Ada is loosely based on a junior high school friend of mine named Ann Thomas Aylesworth. And she lives in Bishop, California now. She's tall and lean and tough and gritty and no nonsense. And she's been my friend since the 7th grade, 1969 in Huntington, New York. We've remained friends all these, I think that's about 50 years since we've been friends. And what was wonderful about having a muse like Anne is whenever I would come to a situation where I wondered how Ada would act or a situation experience, I could call or Zoom or text or Facebook message to Anne, and she would be very honest with me about what her reaction would be. That she helped me in some really pivotal scenes, Linda, and that was good to have somebody. I love that the circle is wide. The more people that you can bring into your circle when you're writing is wonderful. I mean, you're there at your desk. You have to do the hard work, but especially when you base a character on someone, you have a muse, or you run up against a situation where you have, ask the questions. Widen your circle and ask those questions, because readers have again, all of their own biases and experiences and worldview that they can bring to you. Right now, in my third novel, I'm not basing my character on anyone, but I had no idea what it would be like to live in an itinerant community. My character is the daughter of a contemporary of Buffalo Bill. So she's on the road for most of her childhood. And through a Facebook chat on one of those book sites, I was put in touch with a woman who had lived her life as a carnival family. And so she's been able to help me, even though it's, 100+ years apart. There's some things that are the same about living an itinerant lifestyle. So just asking those questions and widening the circle and getting all of that information in there. You can never have enough information. At some point you have to, get to your work. But Ada was based on Anne, and I'm very grateful for Anne's input into the formation of that character.
You can never have enough information. That is, of course, the bane of a lot of us who actually enjoy the research part of it as much, if not more than.
Oh, definitely. I feel like I have about 50 master's degrees by now in different subjects because of the depth that I've had to research. Right now I'm on Arizona history, and that's a brand new subject for me.
I have a master's degree in 19th century chess sets. It's remarkable how much detail you get into when you're writing. And I found, like you did, there was this man somewhere who was, I found him online. I just have a question about this chess set. And he was like an encyclopedia, and it was so interesting.
Oh. Yeah, we meet interesting people. I'm glad I'm living this life now when I'm retired and I don't have 4 children underfoot and I'm not working full time. I really have to hand it to authors who are working full time and have families at home. It's carving that time out for yourself is got to be very difficult. So I feel like I'm in a really good place right now. I can bring myself to my desk every morning, and there's very few places I would rather be than at that desk with those characters. And the proof is in the pudding today when you win an award and you're surrounded by so many readers and friends. It's a lovely lifestyle. And Dad, I'm going to be at it till I'm 91 like you.
I want to interject here too, before we run out of time, that not only are we huge Annie Bloom's books fans, but we are huge fans of the Pacific Northwest Book Association, who encompasses a lot of bookstores and a lot of Pacific Northwest authors like us. And they have a website called Northwest Book Lovers. And if you go to northwestbooklovers.com, I can't remember if it's .com or .org, Northwest Book Lovers, and you put in either Ellen Notbohm or Ashley Sweeney, you're going to get a twofer, because I did what I think was just this amazing interview with Ashley when her book came out, and it goes into depth on some of these questions that we've talked about, Answer Creek. But 2 years before that, Ashley interviewed me on my book, The River by Starlight. And so you can get that voice and that interaction again. So there's a lot more information there. As I said, going into depth on some of these questions, I hope you'll go take a look. It's northwestbooklovers.org.
And I'd like to do a plug for Annie Blooms before you wrap up there, Michael.
Well, thank you.
Many of you have Answer Creek already, and if you want to purchase it for a family member or a friend, you can order through Annie Blooms and they will ship anywhere. But even if you would like to think of Annie Blooms and your other local independent bookstores for your holiday shopping, the bookstores need you. The authors need you. So remember bookstores and authors this holiday season.
Thank you so much for saying that. Yes, definitely. Wherever you are, visit online, visit your independent bookstore and shop there. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Barbara. And
That was a good event, Michael. That Barbara was there with 3 other wonderful authors, and it was a great evening.
Oh, good.
Thank you from me too.
You bet. Thank
And
you.
thank you all for joining us tonight. Really,
Yeah.
I very much appreciate it. And thank you, Michael and Annie Blooms. And thank you, Ellen, my friend.
Well, this does not get you off the hook for coming in person and hanging out with Molly at Annie Bloom's someday, right, Michael?
That's right. One of these days again.
As soon as I can.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Yes, thank you all.
Night.
Night.